I don't know if you guys are feeling it, but watching South Park the last 2 weeks has been something of a relieving experience, reminding myself that other people are seeing and hearing what I'm seeing, and that I'm not going crazy, and that I don't feel as isolated as this insanity kind of continues to just unfold in ways that I think are unprecedented, I think are just so deeply cruel and vindictive, and just flat out stupid. So it's really fun for me to watch South Park and be like, oh yeah, other people are seeing the absurdity and stupidity of this situation. It's not just me. I'm not on my own island. And that's what I've enjoyed about the last 2 episodes of South Park. And I said this last time I was on the air for this. I am a huge South Park fan. I got introduced to this show. I was probably about 12. This was a show that my dad passed on to me. This was a show that he loved, that he had now, and I was too young to watch South Park, if we're being completely honest, but I got to experience it. I got to grow up watching it. I wouldn't call the last few seasons of South Park bad. I think there's still a lot of comedy to be found. I just don't think they've been nearly as prolific and insightful as they were a decade plus ago. I really do think it became really hard to satirize Trump and the absurdity that we were seeing in the MAGA movement. Well, they have responded extraordinarily well, as everyone else is kind of cowarding to Donald Trump, as a lot of people are basically putting up their armor and trying to appease him. You saw Apple CEO Tim Cook give Trump this plaque earlier this week. Just was obviously a gift. That was obviously him trying to get on Trump's good side, and Trump plays into it so much. It's miraculous to me that in season 27, South Park has found kind of a new life again, and they got it with this new episode yet again, got a nut. And let's talk about the 3 major things they satirized and why I think it's so cool to see them joke about this, and how I think it is actually kind of redefining South Park as we go along. This is a show that has been proud to be both sides, which means they make fun of everyone, but everyone that they make fun of is not made equal. They like to poke fun at everyone, but they do occasionally show their hand and make it clear who they really dislike, who they despise, who they have real issues with, where other times they just kind of satirize them for a joke. Let's make it very clear, and season 27 has shown this, they have some real axes to grind with the media now. They have some real axes to grind with Trump and the MAGA movement and basically everyone involved in it, and everyone who kind of got us into this situation. I think a really interesting reoccurring pattern that we've been seeing in South Park this season that I've really loved exploring, when a creator or creators in this case of Trey Parker and Matt Stone are really able to define who their character is and what they believe through this character. And they've been doing kind of a reclamation project on the Eric Cartman character. Again, there has been this thing over the past few years, and I think social media literacy has really emphasized it, where people see something that Cartman does in the show, and they now just assume this is what they believe. This is what South Park is standing for. This is them going against whatever this woke thing is, or whatever you want to say. That's usually the wrong lesson to learn from South Park. When Eric Cartman is doing something, he is a sociopath, he is a psychopath, he is a Nazi, he is a racist, he's a sexist, he's all these adjectives. And that's kind of how they've always defined Eric Cartman. He is the worst of the worst. He is a terrible human being. And this season, they are exploring what happens when America just becomes filled to the brim with Eric Cartman. What that means, how bad it is, and how much less fun everything becomes of it. Eric Cartman, as they say in this episode, is reactionary. He is somebody that likes to piss people off. And when other people are doing it, he doesn't get that same reaction. He is completely an edgelord going to shock and offend people. When everything is shocking, when everything is offensive, guess what happens? Nothing is shocking, nothing is offensive. And that's what Eric Cartman has been having to reconcile with this season. When everyone acts like him, the world's a shitty place. And he's having to learn this lesson, and he's now having to, and I think this is actually a really smart thing that the creators have been doing with South Park, you have to go more extremist, which means if you say this thing, I have to now top you. For those who didn't hear, my cat's feeders just went off right behind me. Looking at this week's episode of South Park, there were 3 characters that they went hard after. You have the conservative, I'll call him pundit, but douchebag is the better word, I think, for him, Charlie Kirk. You had Kristi Noem, who is the head of the Homeland Security, and you have VP JD Vance, who's also tied into Donald Trump in this episode. So let's talk about them. And I want to talk about the one that I thought was the funniest, which was the Kristi Noem's portrayal in this episode. Now, Kristi Noem is truly like one of the most disgusting human beings I've ever had the dishonor of reading about. I came to learn about her probably the same way a lot of you have come to learn about her. For those who do not remember, a little over a year ago, she was a potential candidate for the vice presidency spot before JD Vance got it. She is the governor, or was the governor, of South Dakota, and she made a lot of headlines in spring of 2024 for her biography, which was just one of the most disgusting and vile things, especially me being an animal lover. So here's an excerpt from The Guardian about it. So in her biography, which she writes, which she lies throughout, she lies about this time that she met North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and stands up to him. But there is this one lie. But there is this one antidote that she gives that is just disgusting, which is, according to an excerpt which was obtained by The Guardian, Noem killed her dog Cricket because the dog was untrainable, dangerous to anyone she came in contact with, and less than worthless as a hunting dog. This is an insane thing to write about. One, just the inhumanity of the way that you put down a dog is just disgusting. There are humane ways to kill animals. It's also just true the fact that she volunteered this information, and she made it sound like, oh, this is the tough decisions that make me a great leader. These are the decisions that make you a fucking psychopath. And that's what you are. And it's insane that she is the director of Homeland Security. I was recently in the airport and they had a PSA and she was the face on the PSA. And South Park really nails this. She is the most Botox-laden person I have seen in quite a while. South Park portrays her as her face kind of melting off. That's not a bad description of her at all. And it's just the ridiculousness of it. The staging of yourself on ice raids that we've seen people celebrities like Dr. Phil participate in. I guess Dean Cain, the actor, is joining in on them now. I think Dr. Oz has been along. Kristi Noem's doing them and taking photos of herself participating in these raids as families are being destroyed because of these actions. It's just utterly despicable and disgusting, and this episode really hits on that, and they're so mean to Noem's in a really funny way. Besides the Botox thing, which is just an absolutely disgusting way to portray this, the funniest joke, and I had to admit, every time they did it, it got funnier and funnier, is every time Kristi Noem sees a dog, she goes on a killing spree. So it starts with her just killing a puppy, and then it escalates where this is so bad to laugh at. They're at a Dora the Explorer show, and they go to invade it as ice. And then all of a sudden you see a service dog, and she shoots the service dog. It's such a messed up scene, and it's so funny, and they reoccur this joke 5 or 6 times in the episode, and it ultimately ends with her going into a pet shop and just massacring all these dogs. The joke does not stop getting funny. The joke only gets funnier the more they repeat it. I didn't mean to put a crypto shirt on today and didn't think about it for this review, but Crypto appears in this episode to save our two protagonists, Clyde and Mr. Garrison, from Trump Island. We'll get to that one in a second. And she shoots Crypto, and it's so dark, it's so funny, and it again captures this thing. No one made enough fun of her for publicly giving us this information. This is an incredible piece of satire that this woman just gave to us, just told us, this is something that I think shows that I'm a good leader. It's ridiculous. It's so stupid. South Park captures this essence so well in this character, who is just truly one of the most vile. You could tell the creators had knives out for her. They really did not like Noem. But let's talk about some of the other elements of this episode. One element that didn't work for me a ton was the Charlie Kirk subplot of this episode. So essentially the framing device of this episode is you have two stories. You have one of the stories is essentially Mr. Garrison gets fired due to the federal cuts on schools, and he essentially now needs a new job. And he sees ICE is having a hiring bonus where you get I think it's $40,000 up front for joining ICE, and you have $100,000 paycheck per year. And so he decides to join it, and it leads to us meeting Kristi Noem, and then leads to us going to Mar-a-Lago, which we'll get to in a second. The secondary story, which I just don't think was nearly as fleshed out, was the one with Charlie Kirk, with Eric Cartman essentially becoming Charlie Kirk. And what we learn here is this, again, it's this idea of who Eric Cartman is and what he's having to reckon with, which is what happens when everyone around me becomes Charlie Kirk. So essentially we have the character of Clyde, who becomes a manosphere podcaster. He's just sitting there. He's debating people on points. He's trying to, as he puts it, own the libs and own the woke crybabies. He has his male enhancement tablets, whatever the products that Charlie Kirk is typically shilling on his shows, he has them. And this pisses off Cartman because he's like, yo, man, I'm the OG racist. I'm the OG Charlie Kirk. This shit ain't flying with me. And so he essentially begins to become Charlie Kirk. He puts his hair in the stupid way. He's doing the whole going to campuses and owning college girls and making them look like idiots, the whole 9 yards. And he calls it master debating. And there's a running joke in this episode where he's like, oh no, mom, I'm just master debating to college girls. It's a very funny joke. And again, this is one where the humor of this really landed for me. I thought this was really funny. I thought this idea that these guys are all just jerk-offs and that's essentially what they're doing in this, I thought that was really funny. It's the thing of this plot line never really goes anywhere. And again, it's kind of just because the ICE story is so prevalent in this episode that the Charlie Kirk side story is just not really anything that's a factor. It just has a few funny lines here and there, but again, it's not really anything more than it. The clip that you saw going around social media last week when they were promoting this episode, which was him telling Bebe, you hate America and you love abortions, whatever the line is, that's really half the joke. There's not that many more scenes of him as Charlie Kirk. I kind of wish they were able to do more with this joke. Again, it's still a very funny portrayal. You now see guys like Charlie Kirk and JD Vance, which we'll get to in a second. Charlie Kirk is now pretending he's in on the joke. If you were watching this episode and you understood what you were saying about you, then they're calling you a fucking asshole grifter. That's all they're calling you in this episode. They don't give you anything of redemption. They just call you a jerk off. There's no way JD Vance saw this episode before releasing his statement on Twitter where he's like, well, it looks like I've made it. In this episode, the funniest line, this is the hardest I laughed, is JD Vance, and I did not get the parody at first. I had to look it up because I wasn't sure. I was vaguely aware of this show called Fantasy Island. I didn't know this is how they dress, this is how they look. That they had a short little man as the sidekick in that. They make it Fantasy Island, and we're on Mar-a-Lago, and Trump's the main guy, and JD Vance is this little guy, and he talks airplane, and it's so freaking funny. And Trump kicks the baby and JD Vance goes flying, and you got the JD Vance. He has the fat face. It's just, it pisses him off because he's been very clear on he's annoyed by those memes, and they're doing it in this episode. But the funniest thing in this episode, the hardest I laughed, JD Vance's only role in this episode is to get kicked by Donald Trump and then offer baby oil up for Satan's asshole so Trump can have anal sex with the devil. That is a fucking brutal thing to get satirized as. I thought it was so funny. I thought it was perfectly vindictive and mean and really just showcased how much these guys are clearly having fun at these people's expense and how I don't see this stopping anytime. We should talk about the other element of this episode that I also thought was really funny, which is the Mr. Garrison joining ICE. And this is where he meets up with Kristi Noem, which we already talked about. But there are these scenes, and again, it really just does portray the awfulness of ICE, which you can just go in and you can just start wrecking shop, and they think it looks cool, and it totally doesn't, and what they're doing is awful and destroying families. And it also specifically captures something really important. They're not capturing criminals, they're capturing good people. The only 2 times we see a real ICE raid in this episode, one is they go to the Dora the Explorer live concert, filled with children, and they start arresting families and children, and they even arrest Dora to then be taken to Mar-a-Lago, which is portrayed as basically Fantasy Island, aka Epstein Island, and like Dora's now like massaging older men. Like it's very clear what they're suggesting goes on at Mar-a-Lago, which is, yeah, what do you think is happening? The fact of what Epstein Island was doing, the fact that Epstein's so connected with Trump, like that's in this episode. The other one that you see it, and it's the second hardest I laughed after the JD Vance baby oil joke. There is this scene where this guy is saying immigrants are great people. They help our community. So many of them are in heaven. And the next scene we cut, and it is an ICE raid in heaven, and they're arresting Latinos in heaven. This is one of the best examples of religious satire that I've seen in a while, which is this thing that I talked about last week in my episode of South Park, which was my personal connection with Christianity, somebody who found it later in life and then has recently been moving away from it as I saw this rise of conservatism, as I saw this rise of MAGA, which was always there, but became far more dangerous and far more evangelical focused and cruel in nature over the past few years. It was becoming too hard to ignore, and I just had to step out. I didn't believe there to be any good faith left in a lot of these conversations that were happening, and I no longer found it to be tied anything close to what the idea of what I believe the Bible to be saying when I found God when I was like 17. That was like a huge personal thing for me to see this episode essentially say, oh yeah, no, Trump, MAGA, they don't care about good people. They don't care about so-called Christian values. If you're Mexican and you're brown and you're in heaven, guess what? We don't want you there. This is whites only. This white supremacy that is so inflicted the church and Christian religion is so vile and disgusting, and it's so hypocritical of everything that you hear them preach on Sunday. One of the most painful experiences I've had that really just drew me away from so much of this was a few years ago. I went to this church in my hometown, and the guy who, I didn't know what this church was. I didn't know that they were actually basically Fox News mouthpieces at the time. Like, that is quite literally what he is doing. He's not talking anything biblical. He is really just talking like Fox News talking points and tying it kind of into sermon so it like sounds justifiable. I thought it was such a bastardization. I thought it was so cruel. I thought it was so evil. And to see so many people like being caught up by this and being like, hell yeah, it disgusted me. It truly disgusted me. I think this episode captures that feeling very well. And I think that's what satire is supposed to do. This idea of this feeling that I talked about earlier, where I'm sitting here most of the time and thinking, is everyone else seeing what I'm seeing? How can this be happening? Satire is able to point out, no, this is happening. This is crazy. This is awful. We need to be able to joke about it. And by joking about it, we can talk about it out in the open. I think that's what South Park has done best at their peak. And I think that's what they've been able to refine these past 2 episodes. And again, this is now not me saying like South Park is for the libs. South Park is progressive. South Park is blah, blah, blah. Like, that's not what this is. I'm sure in the next few weeks we'll see an episode where South Park is taking shots at the Democrats or the left side or whatever. Or they make points that maybe disagree with my own political beliefs. I think there's a lot of value in that. And I think the ability to be able to laugh and find common ground and talk about it in that way with people, even if you disagree with it, I still don't think that me disagreeing with a political value that they may show in the show is me saying that I don't appreciate what the show is tackling in there. I think there is a lot of strength in being able to discuss this and talk about this and make it a conversation point when it's done in good faith, which I largely have always found South Park to be done in good faith.